Welcome back to another Performance Matters podcast. In this particular episode, we welcome back Dr. Conrad Gottfredson, who's the founder of the 5 Moments, who takes us through something known as the critical impact of failure ratings, which is a game changer when it comes to implementing 5 Moments and moving towards a performance-first approach. Here we go. So friends, today we are very excited to take a deeper dive into the methodology, our value to the enterprise, how L&D is becoming, in our opinion, incredibly critical to the success of the world we live in today and the performance of the organizations we support. And today we're bringing in an expert in this area. If not, he is the pioneer, thought leader of this whole framework, Dr. Con Gottfredson. It's great to have you, Con, here. Looking forward to the dialogue.
Well, as always, Bob, it's wonderful to be a part of any conversation with you.
Wow, thanks, friend. And I know those listening are really honored to have you here and thrilled about what's to follow. So can we go back and pivot on something? Before we came into here, you were talking about ways in which L&D can do remarkable things for an organization, and there's a number of them. But one sort of leads us into our discussion today, which, friends listening, is going to be about something called the critical impact of failure. We tack the word rating on it. That's the tool. But the exercise is transformational, I think, for an organization to see the work like they never have before. Could you give us that quote, if you wouldn't mind, from your thinking? And then we'll kind of,
Sure.
can we peel that onion back from there?
Yeah, 2 weeks ago, I went through an exercise where I asked this question: what can L&D professionals do that no one else can do in an organization to deliver measurable business impact? And I came up with a handful of things that we do that no one else can do. And one of them has to do with this whole mitigating the risk of failure and the costs that can happen in terms of work performance failure. Just recently, I looked at an approach that a large multinational organization is using to estimate and prioritize their learning. And they were looking at complexity and at importance. They were trying to do that importance thing, and also looking at frequency. And so I remember a long time ago getting caught up in those 3 variables. Yeah. And the greatest variable is importance, because what is important to you and what is important to me? You ask 5 SMEs what's important, and you get 5 different answers,
Yep.
And really everything's important.
Right.
But when I came face to face with this insight that the justification for people stopping work to learn is tied to the degree in which failure impacts the organization, the critical impact of failure. And of all the things that we can do, this is one of the most significant ways in which we can differentiate who we are and what we do and monetize it in terms of impact. It's just a very important part of our methodology.
Brilliant. So let's go deeper, right? So Donna Ostich, our wonderful colleague, did a great podcast a couple back. Those listening, if you didn't listen to it, go back and download it, around part of the methodology, part of Enable that begins this. And that's, we both agree, another significant game changer and shift in how we are seen and the service we can provide, called rapid workflow analysis. Yeah. So I've got a lens of the work. I understand the tasks, the processes, supporting knowledge. I really, for the first time for many organizations, can show via a workflow, but also via the tasks that support that, what the work does. And that, as Donna so brilliantly articulated, is a remarkable lift for most organizations who don't see that to begin with, right? And positions us also very differently. So now I've got the schematic. Right? I'm driving towards deliverables. I'm driving towards what I would make for the performer to perform. But there's still this decision on what and how much and
Yeah.
if things are trained, not taught, right? Everything's taught in one way, shape, or form, but instructed like formally.
Yeah. Yeah.
So take us through the if you don't mind, on the ground, Con. Take us through adding to Donna's description of what does SIF mean? What's the acronym? Give us the, and then we'll go from
Sure.
there.
Sure. My mom, who was really, my mother, who was a really remarkable student and person, um, once said to me, she said, Con, whoever said anything worth doing is worth doing well didn't have a lot of things to do. And, as uh, I've yet to talk to a learning professional who has been given all the time they need,
Right.
that person needs to be able to train on everything. And as a matter of fact, it would be a crime to do so.
Correct.
In terms of caring for the resources of the organization. All skills are not created equal. There are some skills that where if you don't perform it correctly, the impact of failure is significant to catastrophic. And there are other skills where if I make a mistake, I can learn from it and I can recover from it, but the cost is minimal. And so, why would you invest the same amount of effort on helping, on training someone on a skill where the critical impact of failure is minimal versus something that's catastrophic? We know that methodology makes a difference, Bob, right? We're instructional designers. We understand the fundamental principles of instruction. But when do you invest all of those principles? When do you invest modeling? When do you invest practice? When do guided and extended practice? All the things that we can do. Well, it is tied to the degree in which a skill has a critical impact of failure and how complex it is. So CIF is critical impact of failure. We have a scale that we've developed, a scale of 1 to 7, a 1 being, there's hardly a blip if you make a mistake. I can recover, or versus a 7, it's catastrophic. People, it can bring an organization to its knees. And then there's a 5 on that scale that is significant, big, costly, and it's those higher impact of failure ratings that justify stopping work to learn. Stopping work to learn cost. It costs an organization. And so we've got to be able to justify that. And you don't justify that by frequency. You can't cost justify to a business leader frequency or even complexity to do that. But you can if the critical impact of failure is there, because you can put real dollars to that failure cost.
So let me ask a couple questions, Con. They always come up. So you're saying we're skipping stuff because in my training mentality, in my training first thinking, I want to run it some, some, right? We hear these all the time, right? And so it's like, so I sit with my SMEs, who of course everything's important. There's a difference than criticality. Everything is important. And we start going through this rating and they go, wait. So you're not going to teach theoretically 4s or lower, 3.5 or lower. How are they going to ever learn that stuff then? That stuff will be skipped, Con. What's your argument to the skipped thing?
No, you treat it instructionally according to its complexity and its critical impact of failure. It's just, how do we treat it? How do we teach it? We don't skip anything. We really don't. And so if all you've got is the classroom, and some organizations have, that's all they've got. That's the only pop that they've got, the classroom, be it an e-learning classroom, your virtual classroom or face-to-face. That's all we've got. Well, you still don't treat every skill in terms of your instructional investment the same. If it's a 1, 2, or 3, you maybe talk about it. You may give them a job aid, and then you move on, because they've got what they need. But then if it's a 5, 6, or 7, depending upon what that is, you've got to do more. That's when you've got to give feedback. You've got to practice. You have a greater instructional treatment. And if by chance you have the moxie to develop a digital coach, that is, you've got the drive and the disposition that will go with a person into the workflow, well, that's e-learning 2.0. A digital coach is there. 2 clicks, 10 seconds. I've got help walking me through the steps of that task. And I can learn by doing. That's what true experiential learning is. Learning by doing. You don't, and so you might learn some by doing in a made up practice exercise in a classroom. Yeah, and you might have some simulations and other things where the critical impact of failure justifies that kind of investment. But then you can have those low risk skills, pushed into the workflow with a digital coach that I can close my own skill gap when I come face to face with a moment of need in which I need to perform that task. And the first time I do it, I'm learning. The second time I do it, I'm learning even more. The third time I'm doing it, I'm learning even more. While being coached through it by a digital tool that lets me get to the steps and all the resources that I need.
So let me bounce something off you here then, friend. I would argue that our responsibility as L&D folks, I'm going to take ID out of this, just people that are in this world, is to enable our charges, our learners, to perform as effectively, get to a level of competency as quickly and efficiently as possible, and remain there.
Oh yeah.
That is our, at the end, I think any business would say, that's what I'm paying you for. You happen to do it through this LMS thing you have or through your brick and mortar. I get all that. But in the end, as the consumer or the manager of the consumer, that's what I want the end product to be.
Yeah.
I would argue, and you just said it, Con, and I think this is an elephant in the room that we have to understand and be in support of, and understand how we do this. Experience is the best teacher you could ever have.
It is.
There's not a classroom in e-learning, a VR, that can top touching, doing, and
right.
Frankly, sometimes failing, to my way to competency. The problem is it has to be, I shouldn't die from doing it. It shouldn't hurt the organization, and it shouldn't take forever. You're right. So what SIF rating did for me, Con, was it helped me reorient around the deliverable I'm trying to build. And in the end, I want to minimize, if not, it rarely happens, eliminate formal instruction.
Yeah.
If I can.
Yeah.
Right? Why do you think that's been so hard for us to embrace, though? Why do we, in our SMEs, candidly, I think struggle seeing that in how we've been seen or the deliverables we've made? Where does that come from, or how do we turn that mindset?
It's our definition of what learning and training is. We have a faulty disposition. I'm still astonished at Gloria Geary, Bob. In the 1990s, she had the insight to view, and she talked about it as intentional and unintentional learning.
I love that.
And I can learn unintentionally, I can not intentionally. It was, I can learn, but I'm not really thinking about learning. It just
Sure.
it happens over time, and that's what experiential learning does. Every time we do something, we're learning. Every time we perform a task, every time, because we know that that things don't happen the same way every time. There are adjustments we need to make. There are questions or challenges that happen, and I learn and I grow over time. But learning while, in the flow of work. So I we have to understand that I I can I can step into a classroom, I can do all of that. That's learning, but we also learn experientially without thinking about it, right? And if we understand that and we see the workflow for what it is, and we look beyond this training thing, the furthest that we can get in training is maybe to a novice, or maybe a little bit beyond a novice level of skills. Are we content with that?
No.
Right. If we bring a digital coach, we know that we can get to proficiency, right? We can get people to where they're proficient, confidently proficient, confidently competent in their work, right? That's really good. But over time, I've just been reading some work by an amazing psychologist, and his whole work was about developing intuitive expertise. Daniel Kahneman, and his whole professional career was about intuitive expertise. And what he said was that true intuitive expertise is learned from prolonged experience with good feedback on mistakes.
Wow.
Well, wow, what an insight.
Right.
And, intuitive expertise, that's what I want if a doctor's going to perform surgery on me. I want that intuitive where they can see, and they may not be thinking about it, but they can see something's not right and adapt and adjust. That happens over time. And we can intentionally support that. That's what the power of a digital coach, Bob.
Right. Well, that's what, if I may, Con, that's where I love, and I think we need to broaden the word feedback in that sentence you just said, because I think we have a myopic view of that.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And I feedback is a broad bucket to me. Right. AI can help with feedback. Yep. A digital coach clearly is a form of feedback. Sure, yep. A coach is, a mentor is, I get all that. But I think, Con, too often we hear the word feedback, we almost go to the humanistic side of it, of someone looking over my shoulder, these types of stuff. And the way he articulated that, especially the over time thing, for me, is that there's no organization that can afford, nor should they, have coaches watching me for months or stepping into my work. Right. And the digital coach, as we've called it, and the last podcast was on a deeper dive of that, is if that's our bullseye. Yeah. If we can change to that being our deliverable, like right now, it's a class and e-learning or something. If it changes everything for us. Yeah. And more importantly, for those we support, right?
And the nature of that feedback and the investment in that feedback is different if the failure is associated with critical, if the impact of failure is critical to catastrophic, right? And frankly, this feedback is the one fundamental principle of instruction that has fallen by the wayside in most of the formal learning, because it's costly to do because of what you've just said. We've had a narrow view of what feedback is, but also we don't have time because we're trying to cover everything. And when you try to cover everything, then you have to let go of the very principles that we vitally need when the impact of failure is significant to catastrophic. We've got to be able to invest in that instructional treatment, which means that something's got to be shift. And what we've got to do is to understand what is safe failure, where people can fail safely and learn. And that we've got to find another way of people learning and frankly, closing their own skill gaps real time at the moment of need in the workflow. That is the ideal way to do it.
And kind of always been, since we've taken a deeper dive into this, it's helped me look at solve differently.
Oh,
The need of solve, right? Because solve to me was always, I've made a mistake. I'm at the point of failure or past it. So now I have to go back and solve. Well, wait a second. There are degrees of solve,
yep.
right? And so I'm a pilot and something starts happening, right? Failure would be crashing. But I don't want to wait till then to remediate, right? So in the early stages of failure, if I've been taught to use a digital coach, 2 clicks, 10 seconds, so because it's a slight deviation from correct, bringing back quickly, safely is a form of solve, not, okay, I have a question because this just happened to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's where I think, especially with high critical tasks, a digital coach in this form of instruction is so much more important than ever, because people won't leave even a SIFT class, a targeted training class, to your point, and know it all, or be masters at it, be competent at it.
So we need to sustain the development of intuitive expertise. If the critical impact of failure is significant to catastrophic, you want somebody who intuitively can see that problem coming at 100 yards and adapt and adjust, or at least know what to do. Way back when we had an instance in which a pilot had just a matter of a few seconds to figure out how to keep that plane from landing in the river in New York, right? And his expertise was such that he knew what to go to. He could see it coming, he understood it, and his intuitive expertise saved those lives.
And the outcome was the same, in that the plane eventually was on the ground.
Yep.
Right. But it wasn't going to be at an airport, and he didn't want it to be nose first.
Right.
Into the ground or into one of the largest cities in the world. So he engaged in solve, right? Tapped his expertise, but at the same time used what he'd been taught to validate, reinforce, do things he probably never even dreamt he'd do in his lifetime, simulators included, and brought the plane in for a different kind of landing.
Yep.
Right? Every organization, every employee has a degree of their own version of that.
Yep.
And I love your intuitive expertise, Con. I love that. Right? Because competency is one thing.
Yeah.
Expertise, right, is kind of really another. Can we close with that? What's your how have you, and that's been a recent thing for you with me.
Yeah.
How have you arrived at this expertise thing?
Well, I I keep looking at where people are, and we're measuring now, in ways that we haven't, and where people are after training, and then we've been shooting for competence, and yet for me, it's clear that there's growth beyond that. Time to proficiency, to being fully proficient on the job. That's the next step. And then there's this expertise, this intuitive expertise that's there. So I'd look at continuous improvement very different. I'd look at as the development of expertise. That's what we need to be facilitating and bringing about in organizations. And the work by Kahneman has just been so insightful to me. Feedback on failure, over time. Wow.
Yeah. Kind of, and this is the sophistication of this conversation if those listening would pause for a second and think about the last training conversation they had, or the last request someone came in their office and asked for X days or 9 e-learnings of, doesn't even touch this.
Yeah.
And if we stay there, if we stay back there, knowing through your methodology, through Enable, through what you've taught us, we can absolutely go here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shame on us.
Which is where we need to be. Yep.
So appreciate you, Con. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Brilliant. Great conversation. So insightful. Looking forward to people's feedback on this. Thanks for all you do. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Bob.
Well, that's it for this episode of the 5 Moments of Need Performance Matters series. We look forward to future conversations around how to best put the 5 Moments of Need into practice. We welcome your feedback and can be reached at our 5 Moments of Need website, which is www.5momentsofneed.com. We hope you're finding these helpful and will subscribe to future episodes. Have a great day, friends.